Hello there, very good evening. This is the weekend edition of Primetime News on TV1. I'm Martin Satyanesan for the News First, where people come first. Let's start off with a look at your headlines for this evening.
News First headlines. Main sponsor.
Valuable Finance, best finance company.
Queues continue to grow in the country. Another life lost in a fuel queue. Laugh gas increases prices despite cylinder shortage. Cost of milk tea and water bottles go up. IDD call charges increased. Decision to increase charges of electricity bills next week. Citizens protest, demanding solutions to the growing problems. Prime Minister declares open dedicated economic centre in Jaffna.
News First headlines. Main sponsor.
Valuable Finance, best finance company.
On to those stories in detail. Protests are continuing in Sri Lanka as problems continue to grow in the country. People in Colombo and its suburbs are now among those taking to the streets out of frustration. Our reporters met with protesters who participated in silent protests this evening. We begin our coverage today in Jayala, where Ravidu Jaikudi met with some of these protesters.
People here in Jayala also took to the streets today to protest against the government's failure to maintain or rather to secure the economy of the nation. Now the significance of this demonstration is that none of these demonstrators are affiliated to any political party in the country. And when we ask them why they are here today, they say that they are here because they cannot bear these woes anymore.
All this time we have been telling we earn, we spend, like api hambo keruwa tapi kana, we don't want politicians. I have come forward not because of me or not because of us, it's because of our children. They are destroying your children's tomorrow. That is worse than just being in a queue.
You have to know to give people the right cabinet ministers who have at least learned and educated. All the people who are there, I'm not very sure whether they are educated or not. Have we at least learned about finance to manage a country's finance? So what we ask is to give the country or to place the country to somebody who can do, who has been educated about this, who is financially highly intelligent about this matter.
The current economical situation has reached an unbearable level for the public, general public, and the prices of all commodities have doubled, tripled, and released to the market.
This is unacceptable, and the government should take full responsibility for this.
People travelling along the road voiced their support for the protesters.
Hajra Muhid joins us from Rajagiriya at the site of a silent protest.
Right now I am near the Victoria's home in Rajagiriya. What is special about this protest is they are not affiliated with any political parties. They are here by their own accord. They have gathered here to express their displeasure against the current government's misconduct and mismanagement.
Everybody is affected now. It's not just one person, and we need everybody to come and unite as one and join forces.
And given the country situation, we are all in the same pot. Rich, poor, educated, uneducated. We need a solution to get out of this trap, and we need government to act
You know, these ugly Americans have come and robbed us left, right and center, lock, stock and barrel. So now this is why we are in this situation.
We're out on the road today because we are so fed up. We are really suffering and we want this government to quit and we want somebody who can govern to come back. That's why we are on the road today.
With the government which has absolutely no conscience, no sense of accountability, and there's no plan, letting things take its course, and it's really disgusting.
Don't they have a conscience to realize the suffering of the people? And then they are not finding a solution, but it goes on and on.
It's very sad that these people don't hear or listen or see these protests, and they completely ignore the suffering masses.
Visal Kapuge joins us from Kohuala, where people have been protesting for several days. A silent protest was also held in Mount Lavinia and Kolpiti this evening. We will have more details of this particular story later on the bulletin. Moving on, Sri Lankans are no longer strangers to long queues. The general public suffer while standing in queues to purchase diesel, petrol, gas cylinders, kerosene oil and even milk powder. The severity of the situation is evident in the fact that the second death of a person while standing in one of these queues was reported today.
A man standing in line to purchase fuel at a fuel station in Kadavatha was the victim of this tragic incident. The man, who fell on the ground unconscious, had only been taken to hospital when members of his family arrived at the location. According to police, the victim was pronounced dead upon admission to the Ragama hospital. The deceased was Samaravira Rachige Edmund Richard Pereira, a 70-year-old resident of Markola. He is the second person to die while standing in a queue during the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, the final rites of the person who died yesterday while standing in a queue to purchase fuel in Kandy was observed today. The deceased was Mohammed Nisar Ilyas, a 71-year-old retired police officer. Mohammed Nisar had served in the police department for 30 years. People have lost their lives in the past months due to poor decision-making on the part of authorities. The explosion of gas cylinders was one main problem that resulted in the untimely death of people. These explosions occurred after the gas composition in cylinders was changed, eventually resulting in leaks. Investigations revealed that 7 people had died and nearly 100 were injured in the explosions. Justice has not been served upon the victims even until today. Responsible officials have not been brought before the law, indicating a lack of responsibility and accountability. Today, people are collapsing and dying in queues while they were standing for fuel, gas cylinders and milk powder. What was the main issue that forced people to take to the streets? You might remember the fertilizer crisis caused by instant decisions, which eventually left farmers in rural Sri Lanka helpless. Farmers who should have been tending to their paddy fields took to the streets for many months. Today, the country is facing the repercussions of these decisions. At present, people are suffering without food amidst a plethora of issues relating to their livelihoods. At the same time, people are dying in queues as well. If incidents such as these are not reported in other countries, why are they taking place in Sri Lanka? Who should be held responsible for this? No one seems to be taking responsibility for these deaths. Similar to the deaths and injuries that were reported due to the gas explosions. Who understands the problems of the people? Ultimately, there is no one for the people except the people themselves. Sri Lanka is blessed with so many riches. We have 500,000 square kilometers of ocean around us in the Sea of Sri Lanka, a unique treasure by itself. We have rich biodiversity. We have over 100 amazing rivers. We have thousands of years of history. We have world-renowned natural resources and a creative, determined people. We should be one of the most prosperous nations in our region. But today, we are on the brink of bankruptcy. Where have our treasures gone to? Who has pilfered our nation's wealth? How come our people are so poor and our reserves so low? Who is responsible?
Laughs Gas increased the cost of 12.5 kilogram cylinders up to 4,199 rupees today. The cost of the cylinder previously stood at 3,940 rupees. State-run Retro Gas Lanka Limited has not decided to increase the cost of cylinders. The company said it is distributing more than 100,000 cylinders daily. However, long queues were seen for gas cylinders in many areas today as well.
A tense situation arose after a gas dealership in Gampaha had run out of cylinders.
මේගොල්ලෝ එක්කයි යද්දි 12.5 තියෙනවා කියලා කිව්වා. හැබැයි 30ට වඩා තිබ්බා ලොරිය බලද්දි. පොලිසිය මහත්තයා කිව්වා 15ක් හොස්පිටල් එකට දෙන්න ඕනේ 15ක් මිනිස්සුන්ට දෙන්න කියලා.
Tensions arose as there were insufficient cylinders for the people. Some people who were in queue visited a gas cylinder storage facility afterwards.
දැන් ඊට පස්සේ අපි පෙන්නන්න කිව්වා. මෙතන බඩු ඔක්කොම එකින් එක ඇද ඇද බැලුවා. ඒකෙන් 13ක් තිබ්බා. මේ 13 දැන් මිනිස්සුන්ට දෙන්න පොරොන්දු. මේතර හෙටින් පස්සේ ආයතනවල ප්‍රශ්නයක් ඇතුනොත් මං ගාව ලබා දීමට කිසිම තීන්දුවක් නැහැ. මොනවද ආයතන? ආයුර්වේද හොස්පිටල් එක, ආමි එක, BOI zone එක.
The 13 cylinders that were later sold to the people were eventually not enough. Our correspondent reported that the gas dealership had stopped selling cylinders. Long queues were seen in Ratgama since this morning to purchase gas cylinders. A tense situation arose after a lorry carrying gas cylinders reached the area. Many people had to return home empty-handed. Long queues for gas were seen at the Badula town today. A tense situation arose when some people did not receive tokens.
ආණ්ඩුව දීලා තියෙනවා පොඩි මිනිහට හොඳට බඩට දැනෙන්නම ලොකු ඇමතිවරුන්ට කිසි අඩුපාඩුවක් නැහැ ඔක්කොම ගෙදරටම හම්බෙනවා හැබැයි පොඩි මිනිහට පාරේ විතරමයි තියෙන්නේ ගෑස් එකට පාරේ තෙල් ටිකට පාරේ කිරිපිටියකට පාරේ
දැන් ලංකා සිටියමට මොකද්ද වෙලා තියෙන්නේ දන්නේ නැහැ නේද ගෝල්පෙස් සයිඩ් එකේ කෑල්ල චීනෙට දීලා දැන් බඩු ගෙනාවා ඉන්දියාවට ණය වෙලා යාපනේනුත් කෑල්ලක් දෙන්න වෙනවා අපිට.
Many gas dealerships remained closed in Colombo today. Signboards put outside stores read that gas stocks won't be received today and that the situation tomorrow is uncertain. Many people in the Mathura town were unable to purchase gas cylinders today.
The fuel crisis is continuing to aggravate in the country. The Energy Ministry says a 40,000 metric ton diesel consignment imported under India's credit line reached the country this evening. The ministry noted that another diesel consignment is to reach Sri Lanka tomorrow, but long queues for fuel were seen in several areas. They appointed a person with 7 brains. Now the people are facing the brunt of it. He doesn't have brains at all. A person died yesterday. A lady collapsed at a queue. Did any minister visit us? What is the purpose of keeping them in power? The 225 MPs must be chased away. A tense situation arose at a filling station in Ubaparnagama after it ran out of fuel. People had to return home empty-handed. This country is doomed. We purchased diesel after staying in queue for a day. This is what they call the vistas of prosperity. There are no rulers in this country. They are asleep. Farmers in the Hiyattakandia were seen in long queues to purchase fuel for their machines. There is no fuel for our machines to reap our harvest. I'm fed up of this. Many filling stations have run out of both diesel and petrol. There is no point in this. They are gaining more than what they are providing us. When he is addressing us on TV, we begin addressing him. There is no point. We are disturbed by this. Politicians receive commissions. They will enjoy the New Year festival. The money that we earn is to be spent on fuel. Who is going to help us?
There is a shortage of gas cylinders and fuel, although prices were increased recently. The government has decided to increase the cost of several essential commodities. The Sri Lanka Bottled Water Manufacturers Association says the cost of producing a 500 milliliter water bottle has gone up to a price between 65 to 70 rupees. The new price of a 1 liter water bottle in the market is set at 90 rupees. The cost of a 1.5 litre water bottle has risen to 120 rupees and a 5 litre bottle up to 300 rupees. The charges for international direct dialing or IDD calls have been increased. The Technology Ministry Secretary Jayantha De Silva said telecommunication service providers have been informed about this. He added that approval has not been granted to increase local call or internet charges. The Public Utilities Commission says a decision will be made in the coming week on requests to increase the charges of electricity bills. Its chairman, Janaka Ratnayaka, said the Ministry of Power has made a request to increase charges. The Secretary to the Ministry of Power, Wasantha Pereira, said there is no alternative but to increase charges as fuel prices have gone up. The cost of many essential goods and services have gone up within a short period. The price of octane 92 petrol rose to 254 rupees. Octane 95 petrol rose to 283 rupees. Price of a litre of diesel rose to 176 rupees and super diesel rose to 254 rupees. The cost of a pound of bread increased to between 110 and 130 rupees. In addition to this, the cost of rice packets went up by 20 rupees, short eats by 5 rupees and kottu by 10 rupees. In the transport sector, bus fares went up by 15% with the minimum fare set at 20 rupees, while container transport charges went up by 60%. The cost of cement was increased up to 1,850 rupees. Further, the cost of imported mobile phones rose by 30% and medicines went up by 29%. Yesterday, the cost of a 400-gram packet of imported milk powder was increased by 250 rupees. The new price of a 400-gram packet of imported milk powder is now 790 rupees.
Cost of milk tea increased. They have increased the price of milk powder in the market. We have decided to charge 100 rupees for a cup of tea. We won't change the prices for a year. We will only change the prices if the price of milk powder reduces. They increased the cost of imported milk powder yesterday. Why was the cost of local milk powder increased? Does it cost them dollars to feed dairy heifers? We suspect that there is a conspiracy behind the price increase of local milk powder. They claim to produce their milk powder locally, but all they do is import and package it here.
As we reported to you earlier on in the bulletin, many people have organized themselves and taken to the streets against the inability of the authorities to provide solutions to the current crisis in the country. Newsfirst.lk joins us from Kuhuwala, where people have been protesting for several days.
Are people who should not be on the roads. They have other things to do, but for 20 days, since the 1st of March, continuously, every day they have been coming onto the roads and have been engaging in this peaceful protest. They are not inconveniencing any person on the road. They are here merely to show their displeasure in the government, hoping that the government would at least now do something and control the economic crisis in the country.
And we are mainly concerned about our children's future. So we must all get together and protest against this government, because looking at the current situation with the inflation, pricing going up, within another 2-3 months, we don't think we could afford a basic meal for our family.
So we are very, very sorry that they have taken over. They are not intelligent enough to understand the problems of the people and problems of the country.
A silent protest was also held in Mount Lavinia and Kolpiti this evening.
Do a change or they have to leave, so we cannot expect this to go on daily, with the rising costs of living.
It's going to be, now we are going back to the past, which is so sad. We have all the resources here. Why are we not doing it? That's because of the corrupt politicians who are power hungry and they want the money and they're just taking it for themselves. They can get out of the country and they have a life, but what about us?
The end of a journey in search of water. A drinking water project for the people of Mahavilachya in Anuradhapura.
We'll continue with more local stories after this short commercial break. Stay tuned.
Valuable Finance, best finance company.
Register today for a Zoom workshop on new technology in Sinhala.
Win the world with innovations. On the 24th of March at 3 p.m.
Register via 0777 600 020.
Organised by Slit Institute.
Tech Bus.
Main sponsor.
Slit Knowledge University. Challenging convention and redefining education.
News First with the people.
Welcome back to the news. Foreign Minister G.L. Piri says the 7th round of talks for a free trade agreement between Sri Lanka and China will begin soon. He made these remarks during a meeting with Chinese Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Ki Shen Hong, on Friday.
Foreign Minister G.L. Peiris had met Chinese ambassador to Sri Lanka, Kee Hong, at the Foreign Ministry on Friday. The ambassador had said the proposed free trade agreement between Sri Lanka and China would immensely benefit the Sri Lankan local market and products. The Foreign Minister had said the 7th round of discussions in this regard will begin soon. He had also thanked China for their support at the 49th Human Rights Council sessions that ended recently.
The U.S. Under-Secretary for Political Affairs Victoria Nuland attended the 8th Bangladesh-U.S. Partnership Dialogue today.
U.S. Under-Secretary for Political Affairs Victoria Nuland led the U.S. delegation at the 8th Bangladesh-U.S. Partnership Dialogue today. The dialogue is being held to coincide with the 50th year of bilateral relations between the two nations. Bangladesh's Foreign Secretary Masood bin Momen led the Bangladesh delegation at the dialogue. Security cooperation, trade, global threats and regional issues figured during the meeting that was held at the State Guest House in Dhaka. Nuland is to visit India and Sri Lanka before ending her tour tomorrow. She is to meet with civil society and business leaders in both countries.
Sri Lanka's tourism industry has been affected as arrivals from Russia and Ukraine are dropping.
The Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority says there will be a long absence of tourists from Russia and Ukraine. Tourists from Russia made up most arrivals to Sri Lanka in February. But the Tourism Authority said Russia is not likely to be a primary market for Sri Lanka from February onwards. Official numbers for March 17th showed that 166 Russian tourists arrived in Sri Lanka that day. It's a massive drop from 531 Russians who arrived in a day a month earlier. Only 7 Ukrainians had arrived in Sri Lanka on the 17th of March, although 170 had arrived a month earlier.
The Sri Lanka Tea Board says that tea exports to Ukraine and Russia have been affected. Sri Lanka Tea Board Chairman Anura Siriwardana said Sri Lanka won't be able to export tea to Ukraine until the end of the conflict. Sri Lanka exports about 4 million kilos of tea to Ukraine annually. These rulers are destroying the brand name of Sri Lankan tea, which goes back to about 150 years. The world recognized Sri Lanka due to its quality tea. There is no power to process the tea leaves that are brought to factories. The factory owners then have to go in search of fuel to run generators. They must stand in queue for that. Due to the conflict in Russia and Ukraine, we are unable to sell tea to them. Therefore, we ask the man with 7 brains to identify a new market for us. Communicate this to the ambassadors. If we don't sell our tea, we won't be able to even have some plain tea in the country. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky says the siege of the city of Mariupol is a war crime by Russia's military. Mariupol city officials say several thousand residents have been forcibly taken by Russian forces to Russian cities over the past week. To do this with a peaceful city that the occupiers did is a terror that will be remembered in a century. And the more Ukrainians talk about it to the world, the more we find support. The more Russia uses terror against Ukraine, the worse the consequences for it. Russia has accused Ukrainian nationalists of preparing provocations against US missions to put pressure on NATO. The key goal of provocation to increase pressure on NATO countries, demanding they declare a no-fly area over Ukraine and supply more weapons. Pope Francis has paid a visit to some of the Ukrainian children who escaped the Russian invasion. They are currently being treated at Vatican's pediatric hospital in Rome. More than 2 million Ukrainians have fled to Poland, of about 3.3 million refugees so far. The UN Human Rights Office says at least 847 civilians, including 64 children, have been killed in Ukraine since the invasion.
Shifting attention to more local news, people participated in several other protests across the country today as well.
People in Galle took to the streets today demanding the government answers for the current economic crisis. The protesters marched through the Galle junction.
Farmers of Dehiyatakande engaged in ritual seeking relief from the rising issues in the country.
We are unable to reap 1,500 kilograms or 2,000 kilograms of paddy from the fields from which we reaped 5,000 kilograms back in the day. These villagers can't buy new clothes for the new year. They can't even afford rice and dal. Don't you understand that? If you don't, your brothers, sons, mother-in-laws and everyone else can resign.
A number of environmental organizations, including an organization established to protect the Nura River, inspected several illegal constructions within the boundaries of the Nura River Reserve. The organizations observed that there are many illegal constructions taking place within the boundaries of the Nura River Reserve.
The Nura River that adds beauty to the Anuradhapura town was built by King Valagamba. With a capacity of 36,049 acre-feet, the Nura River irrigates 2,600 acres of paddy fields in both the Yala and Maha seasons. 5,000 farming families use this water source to make ends meet. The Nura River supplies water directly to 30,000 families. Newsfirst reported on allegations raised by farmers that plans are afoot to reduce the spill level of the river. This report was aired on the 31st of January. Another allegation was that many illegal constructions are being carried out within the boundaries of the protected reserve. A group of organizations, including the Organization to Protect the Nura River, inspected the location. Minister of Lands S.M. Chandrasena has attempted to fill the Nura River. He has filled gravel up to about 4 feet here. He has filled the river using other rubble as well. Garbage has been thrown directly into the river. Backhoes are used for construction being carried out on Shehan Semasingha's land. The construction of the hotel behind me began recently, and the river was filled about 4 feet for it. We can see that they are going to fill up a massive section of this river. There are about 203 constructions like this in the area. We inquired on this matter from Minister of Lands S.M. Chandrasena following an event that was held yesterday. When we inquired on this matter from State Minister Shehan Semasingha, he said that he is not involved in any such construction in the area.
News First with the people.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa today visited the site of the Kankasanturai cement factory that is to be uplifted once again.
Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has said 80% of the buildings of the Kankasanturai cement factory, which was built in 1950, can be refurbished and put into good use. The government has drawn its attention towards refurbishing the cement factory once again. Following his inspection, the Prime Minister participated in religious observances at the Kandasamy Kovil in Maviddapuram. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa declared opened a dedicated economic centre in Jaffna today. We were able to save the people in the southern and northern provinces from the pandemic. We will relaunch the development projects that were stalled in your regions after 2015 and take steps to uplift your livelihoods. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa met with traders after the event. Meanwhile, a tense situation arose between the police and families of disappeared persons who had planned to participate in a protest demanding for justice for their loved ones. They had made arrangements to travel to the location where the Prime Minister was, on board 2 buses.
Opposition leader Sajid Premadasa says people have been left utterly helpless due to the crisis in the country.
Opposition leader Sajid Premadasa declared open a Chaitya at the Sri Vijayarama temple in Pannala today. He commented on the country's situation during the occasion.
The poor and those in the middle class are utterly helpless. We are hurt when we listen to the people's problems. The first thought that comes to my mind is that I can provide some form of relief to the people so that I can be happy about it. But they criticize me, saying that I am a person who distributes goods. The country needs a leader who is sensitive to the people's problems. A leader must have the 10 royal virtues and a sensitive heart. I am ready to make the highest commitment. I can ensure that the country is on the right path to success.
The Sri Lanka Freedom Party says the government must inform the people of its plans to alleviate the people from the crises faced at present.
I feel the government must take steps to relieve the people of this burden. We need international support to build this country. The government's economic advisors must tell the people how long it would take to alleviate them from this problem. During the last few meetings that I attended, I said that the construction of roads and highways must be stopped and that the money must be used to import medicine. We can express our views. It's up to the government to implement it.
The Jathika Janabala Vegya convened a media briefing today.
What could we gather from the President's address to the nation? It showed us that he doesn't understand the depth of the country's economy. The government doesn't have the moral right to be in charge of the people of this country anymore. There is no point in inviting us for a discussion after the problem has grown out of control. We have a leader who is deaf and blind to the problems of the people. The government isn't sensitive to the people's lives. The leader hasn't given up on his luxuries even when the people are under immense pressure. The Jathika Janabala Vegya doesn't want to give solutions to the leader. There are protests in all areas. There are massive protests across the country calling on the government to resign. People are crying in queues. They are fainting. They are dying. The people shouldn't appoint a bunch like them who don't bear responsibility for the crises in the country.
Shane Warne's family and friends have bid the cricketing legend farewell at a private funeral in Melbourne.
A father and a son carrying a man who'd carried so many himself.
About 80 guests, including Shane Warne's parents and 3 children, gathered to say their final goodbyes for the cricketing legend today. The gathering also featured retired Australian Test captains Mark Taylor, Alan Border and Michael Clarke. 52-year-old Warne died of a suspected heart attack on the Thai resort island on 4th March. A state memorial will take place at the Melbourne Cricket Ground on March 30th, where the public can pay their respects. The ground's Great Southern Stand will also be renamed in Warne's honour.
From that, we bring to a close this edition of Primetime News on TV1. For details of these stories and much more, simply log on to our website www.newsfirst.lk. I'm Martin Satyanesan for the News First, where the people come first. You take care and good night.